What is RenderZone? RenderZone is a plugin for bonzai3d and for formZ. It offers photo, realistic, and sketch rendering modes, and this is accomplished through global illumination. And so what do we actually do with the RenderZone plugin? Well, here's what we do. We use global illumination to take your shaded work model that we have here. You build your geometry in Bonsai, and using RenderZone, you can use the global illumination to get a very high quality photorealistic rendering. Now, sometimes you don't want a realistic rendering. Sometimes you want something a little more abstract. Well, the RenderZone plugin can handle that too. The image on the left is a sketch render, and you can see there's a whole long list of different sketch rendering modes. So gives it more of an abstract, artistic feel to that. The image on the right is actually a sketch render mode, but we've also used global illumination with that. So we use the global illumination to accurately and easily light the scene, and then we use the sketch render to sort of filter that off into more of an abstract effect. Now, without the RenderZone plugin, you get hundreds of materials that come with bonzai3d, and you can just simply drag and drop them onto the object. It includes live interactive texture mapping, so you can move and rotate and scale a texture right there on the object. Now, if you add the RenderZone plugin, then what do you get? You get more materials and more parameters, so you can do things that you cannot do with a traditional interactive shaded rendering mode. So you can do like ray traced mirror type reflections. You can do bump shader effects. So you can see the stone on the right is just a flat image, and the image on the left is more of a 3D bump shader effect that can be ray traced. You can create accurate glass. The RenderZone plugin also includes a decal tool, which lets you layer multiple materials onto the same object. So not only can you apply it to single faces, but you can also layer up to 32 different materials on top of the same surface. Now, without the RenderZone plugin inside of bonzai3d, you get many different light types. So you get ambient and distant sunlight. So there's a sun database which lets you choose the sun position from anywhere in the world, from any city at any given time. And there's simple parameters which lets you easily set up those light sources. Now, if you add the RenderZone plugin, then what you get is more light types and more parameters. So there's many more different lights that you can choose from. We'll take a look at those in our short little presentation that we have today. And you have more parameters. You can still use the simple parameters, which is a real quick, easy way to set up your scene. Or if you need, there's also accurate parameters. So you can also set up the light using accurate values, like the input power, output efficiency, and watts and things like that. Now, there's a match view tool. You don't need the RenderZone plugin to use that. You can take your 3D model and prospectively match it with the background image. But what you can do with the RenderZone plugin is you can also catch shadows and reflections on that background photograph. So you can see here that these shadows are actually being accurately ray traced and reflected back into the background image. How do you find help to learn these tools and features? Just simply right-click on any tool, any feature, and you can choose the manual option, and it takes you right to that page. The entire manual is embedded inside the program. And you can also right-click on any tool or feature and choose the View Video option. If you choose the View Video, it'll show you a short little video step-by-step of how to use that particular tool or feature. So with that, here's what we're going to do today. We're going to take our model that we have here, and this was modeled in bonzai3d, and we'll see what it takes to take your 3D model and transform it into more of a quality rendering like we see here. Now, sometimes, as we said, maybe you don't want a photorealistic rendering. Maybe you want something a little more abstract. Well, we can do things such as render with just shades of white and use just the bump shader effect. So you can see we can actually render it and have like bump shaders for the stone and the stucco patterns and the wood grain patterns and things like that. We can mix and match different types of rendering effects, like we can do just the flat shades without color, but use the bump shaders and turn the show wires on, so we can actually render the wireframe information. And this is all done with a single rendering pass. This isn't multiple renderings that we collage together later on. This is just based on our settings. We do one single rendering, and that's what we get. So here's another variation of that, but we have colors, bump shaders, and we're showing wires. Here we have a sketch rendering effect. This is a sketch rendering effect, more like a pencil effect, lines and strokes. Of course, maybe that's a little too large there. Well, we have plenty of control over the length of the strokes, the size of the strokes, the angles, and things like that. And as we play with all these different parameters, we can get a very customized look for that sketch rendering effect. Or maybe here's one without the colors, so we get the sketch look to that using just shades of white. or maybe a stipple. There's also mosaic tiling patterns. There's oil painting. There's a long list of different sketch rendering modes that can be used. So with that, let's take our model that we have here and see what it takes to transform it into that. So here we go. Let's go into bonzai3d. And the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to be the designer and you're going to be my client. So I have a very tight deadline. I got to go in and try to impress my client by trying to quickly get a pretty good rendering in about 10-15 minutes. So let's see if I can do that. First thing I'm going to do is explore different types of materials that I'm going to apply to my design. And how do we do that? We look at the materials palette here. If I double click on one of those, you can see I can adjust the color, the reflection, and transparency to create my own materials. Now, I don't have a whole lot of time to create my own, so I'll tell you what, I'll do it a faster way. What I'm going to do is go into the predefined libraries that come with bonzai3d. Hundreds of materials that are organized in different categories here. So I can look at wood, metal, pavement, landscaping materials. Here we have some stone patterns. And if I find one that I like, all I have to do is drag and drop that onto my material. Now all the parameters are set for me. It's just that easy. So now if I want to apply that to objects, all I do is I take that material, drag and drop it on the object, and there we go. All right, so I have a few others that I have created using the predefined materials that come with Bonsai. So here's a nice stone pattern for the wall. We have a 3D bumpy texture stucco pattern for the walls over there. So you can see that sort of, I don't know if you can see that bumpy pattern on there. That is an actual bump pattern on there. Okay, let's see what else do we have. Oh, I wasn't able to find the type of red cedar that I want for the garage. I looked through all the materials that are there. I couldn't find the one that I wanted. Not a problem. I searched the internet. I download any pixel image of what I want, and I could load it right here. And then the pixel image becomes my material that I can apply to the objects. So here we go. So just let me take that wood red cedar, place that on the object like that. Now for the roof, let's see, what am I going to do with that? I'll just choose a brown color for now. So I didn't use any of the predefines. I just chose a brown color for that, apply it to the object. Now to sort of speed things up, instead of placing that onto multiple objects, what I can do is pre-pick multiple objects. And now you can see I can use the handy dandy paint tool, and I can paint multiple objects at the same time. Okay, now I want to put a little more detail for that roof. I'm not going to model the detail yet, so I searched the material libraries and I found a nice little roof pattern that I'm going to use here, and I want to apply it to just one face of the object. So what I'm going to do is, if you're on the Mac, you can hold down the Command key, and if you're on Windows, you hold down the Control key, and then you can apply that material to just the face of the object instead of the whole object. So there we go. We'll just sort of put it on the top face there. Okay, so that's a good way to conceptualize that actual roof. We got the brown trim and the roof material on top of that, and I can always model more detail later. Now, let's change the size of these textures that are on the object, and that's really easy to do. What we do is use the edit texture, so I want to resize it. Just simply click on that object or that face, and you can see I can very easily and dynamically modify the scale and size of that texture right there inside of the modeling window. So I can change the vertical height, I can change the horizontal or vertical size, scale it, I can actually rotate it sideways. Maybe I want the detail to go this way. Now of course I'm just changing these dynamically, graphically, so it looks good, but what's the exact size of this? Well, if I ever need to type in a size, you can see in the tool options palette over here, you can see I can type in numeric information at any time. So you get the best of both worlds. Like let's say I know that the horizontal width of the texture is 4 feet. I can type in 4 feet, and there we go. It's all set. All right. Now, up to this point here, everything that I've shown is inside of bonzai3d by itself. You don't need the RenderZone plugin to do all the stuff that we've done up to this point. So you're saying, well, wow, that's quite a bit. Well, what do we get if we add the RenderZone plugin? Well, what we get is, if we look at our materials, and we convert this into a RenderZone material, you can see that we get more materials, and we get more parameters for those. So we can do things that we can't do with the traditional interactive real-time rendered mode, such as a mirror type of a reflection on the objects, or plastic, specular hotspots, things like that. We can also add bump shader effects. So we can go in and take a flat surface and have it render with a 3D bumpy surface there. I don't have to model every single stone or brick. I can actually have it render so it looks like a 3D texture. And to sort of see that better, what I'll do is, let's let's look at the stone pattern that's applied to our chimney. And here's a neat little feature in bonzai3d. What I can do is pick an object or multiple objects, and I can choose the isolate objects option. What that does is isolates everything. Now, of course, you can organize your project on different layers, just turn the layers on and off, but in this case it's sort of a real quick way just to sort of isolate just parts of your model. Now if I zoom into that, you can see here we're in the interactive shaded work mode, so it's an image map that's mapped flat on the object, and that looks pretty good. But if I were to click on the RenderZone button, so I actually do a RenderZone rendering of it, then you can see we can take advantage of the specular hotspots, we take advantage of the bump shader effects, and so it really takes that 2D flat image and makes it pop as more of a three-dimensional texture on that surface. Okay, and we do get the specular hotspots based on the actual lighting conditions, which is pretty neat. So if I were to change my light, the actual 3D effect would change based on where the actual light is shining from. Okay. All right, with that, let's go into our interactive mode here. Zoom back a little bit. Let's bring the rest of our model back. So let's reveal the objects again. And what else do we need to do with our scene? Well, with the RenderZone plugin, not only can we get more materials and more parameters for those, but we can also add multiple materials onto any surface of any object. And that's achieved using the decal tool. So what we'll do, let's see. Let's take our walls that we have here, and we have nice, clean, pristine white stucco pattern there, so it's sort of a uniform white pattern on there, and that looks pretty nice. But maybe we want to have it look a little more realistic, a little more weathered. So what we'll do is we'll create a separate material, and here we just hit the color gray, and for a transparency effect, we can choose the mist pattern. So we get sort of this misty gray pattern that's partially transparent. And what we're going to do is map that onto our clean stucco walls there. And we'll do that using the decal tool. So let's click on the walls. And inside of this tool, we can apply up to 32 materials onto the same surface of the object. So let's zoom into the side view here. Now, I've already created some other decals that are already placed on there, but I have them all turned off right now. So if I were to do a preview rendering, clicking there on the RenderZone button, we see we have our 3D bumpy stucco pattern for that wall, but it's sort of a uniform shade of white. And so what we'll do is we'll apply a other material, such as this gray mist pattern, to that, and we'll apply it to all the surfaces of the object. So if I turn that on, you can see that now we get this variation, we get sort of this subtle difference that gives it more of a weathered look to that. Okay, and that's the real trick to being able to create realistic textures, is really this layering effect. All right, and let's just add one more just for fun. We'll take the bonzai3d logo. I'm sure you're going to love bonzai3d so much that you'll actually put the logo on the side of your house. And you can see you can place it one time on the object, or you can place it everywhere on the object. You can move it, rotate it anywhere that you want, and we're just layering multiple materials onto that same object. Pretty cool, huh? All right, with that, what else do we need to do? Well, we need to add some lighting to our scene before we do the final RenderZone rendering for our final image. So let's look at our lights. Let's see, here's a sunlight. That comes standard with every project. There's no extra charge for that. Every project has a sun. And if I were to make that visible, I can see it's over there. All right, now in the shaded work mode, you can see if I were to move that sunlight, let's click on that sun and move it, and I don't see any difference in the scene. I don't see any shadows, I don't see any lighting variations or anything. And that's because we're in a shaded work mode, which is a standard mode for creating geometry. And what that does is it puts a light on your forehead, so you're always looking at your geometry and the light is shining from your current position, so it fully lights your scene. It's good when you're creating objects, but to actually see the effect of the actual light sources, you move to the shaded full mode. Now this is a interactive mode, so you can edit the textures and do everything you want. You can move your light source. For example, if I wanted to maybe move just this end over here, now you can see I'm interactively modifying the shadows there just by moving that light. Okay. Now I'm doing this in real time, interactive on my screen here. Now, of course, based on the type of internet connection that you have, we're actually streaming this out, so you may not get the real-time visualization as what I'm getting here. I mean, I'm moving this and it's interactive real time. You might see sort of a delayed reaction as I'm moving that around, because they can only pump so many frames per second across the internet to all the people that are out there. Okay, so anyways, you can see we can dynamically move those lights in the scene. Now you can also position that sunlight If I were to double click on it, you can see I can change the location by choosing any city in any part of the world. So now, right now I'm in Columbus, Ohio. And it's a nice warm sunny day here. It's probably supposed to get up to 91 today, so it's going to be very warm. And here we go. It's Columbus, Ohio in here. There it is right there, Columbus, Ohio. Okay, so I choose that city. We have cities all over the world. You can choose any month, the day, the time, whatever you want, and it automatically positions that sunlight for you. That's good for shadow studies and things like that. All right. Actually, I'm going to undo a few steps back, unlimited undo, so I'm going to put it back where it was just to give it a different type of shadow effect on that scene. All right, what else do we need to do? Well, I'll tell you what, let's add some trees. Let's add some entourage to our scene. Now, here's a really neat feature that's in bonzai3d. There's this layer that's called trees. You just turn it on and trees just automatically appear in the background. No, I'm just joking. You actually have to plant your own trees. There's no tree layer. So how do we do this? Well, it's real easy. What we did was use the place component tool. And you can see bonzai3d comes with hundreds of components that come with it. There's people. There's abstract trees. So if you want more of an abstract look to it, there's all sorts of furniture, realistic trees. Go on down the list there. So let's choose a tree, and we're going to place that. Now, here's a neat feature. You know, the components can be 2D or 3D objects. If it's a 2D object, it's sort of neat. We have this little feature that lets you align that component to your current view. So if I were to plant a tree, it'll always face your current camera angle. Now, of course, I can plant a tree on top of the roof. Maybe you want to do some green type architecture, plant some grass on the roof, and maybe plant some trees up there. Or maybe we just want to do some shadow studies. So we'll just plant it in the front yard there. And now notice that if I were to change my view, I put the align with view option, so that tree will always be facing my current camera angle. All right, I don't think we need that tree there. Let's see, what else can we do? We need to add a background to this instead of just that tan background. So let's go to our options for our display, and you can see there's a background option here. And so we can load any type of a pixel image. We can load it as a spherical or a cubic image, so that image map then is sort of placed around the scene. And so you can see it's sort of wrapped around, so it gives us a 3D effect. Or we can load it as just a single flat image. Now, here I just found a picture. If you have an actual picture of the site, that's sort of nice, because then you can sort of collage your 3D model in with the actual site. Very often you don't have that information, which is fine. Just use any type of image just to sort of fill in the background. Anything that has, you know, trees or bushes or some buildings or whatever, and just sort of fill that in back there. All right, with that, I think we're ready to do the rendering and see what this thing looks like. So at this point, now that we have that set up, we would click on the RenderZone button and do a RenderZone ray trace rendering of our scene. Now, when we do that, there's two major parts to the global illumination, and I'm going to highlight those now. One of them is ambient occlusion. What's that? Well, I'm going to tell you. Here's with ambient occlusion on, and there it is with it off. So one has, with it on, it has a lot more contrast. With it off, it just seems to be more flat. Well, all that the ambient occlusion is doing, it's subtracting ambient light from the corners wherever two surfaces meet. So you see we get a little more darkness around these corners here. So that's with it off and with it on. So where the stone wall hits the grass, the corner of the walls over here in the chimney, and wherever those surfaces meet, it actually calculates and subtracts light from those areas to make it a little bit darker. This is sort of what happens in the real world. It's not using true radiosity, it's just using a real quick process, which is really fast. It's an on-off switch. You just turn it on, and when you render, it's just going to subtract light. It's sort of a subtle effect, but for the final rendering, when you look at that, it's going to really make that image pop. All right, the second major component to the global illumination process is final gather. And what is that doing? Well, let's try it with it on, and that's with it off. So it looks like when it's on, the scene just looks brighter. When it's off, the scene just looks darker. So what's going on? Is this a brightness slider or something? No. What it's doing is it's bouncing light one time. So the RenderZone plugin has a full radiosity process. If you need that, you can go in and calculate light continuously bouncing throughout the scene. But if you're in sort of a hurry and you just want to quickly get a good globally illuminated scene, you turn on Final Gather. It's just an on-off switch. When it renders, it bounces light one time, and usually that's enough to get the light to sort of bounce around to get your scene well lit. So it's a very easy thing. It's fast, and it looks very good. All right, so that's with it off. All right, now here's another neat thing. As I mentioned in the very beginning, it's nice to have the rendering seamlessly integrated into the modeling environment. So if you want to make changes or variations to that actual model, you can see you can make a few changes and render, make some other changes and render, so you can do multiple variations for you being the designer to see that and also to present to your clients. So you don't have to export multiple times and retexture map things and change things around every time. So just to sort of see how that works, if I were to go back into our bonsai model, let's say we want to make some changes. Well, if I zoom in over here, you can see that if I reshape that chimney, you can see that the texture mapping is automatically maintained on that object. Now, I also should mention, any object that you create in bonzai3d will automatically be texture mapped for you, no matter how complex that shape is. It uses flat, cubic, spherical, cylinder, UV mapping, uses the parametric mapping for NURBS objects. It just automatically, behind the scenes, it does it for you. It looks at the geometry, makes the best guess, and applies that to that. And of course, you can change it if you want. Let's make a couple other changes here. Let's go to the offset segment. Maybe take the bottom segment, offset that a little bit. And I'll do an offset segment on the bottom edge over here again. And you can see I can just sort of move that segment up and insert it maybe right about there somewhere. So I've inserted 2 more segments in there. So now if I move, I'm just going to grab that face right there and move that out. And you can see as I'm changing that geometry, all that texture mapping information is maintained with the object. Let's just try a couple other variations just for some fun here. Maybe we'll change the garage, maybe put a stucco pattern for the garage, and then maybe apply the red cedar just for the door. See how that looks. Okay. And then when we're done making all of our changes, we click on the RenderZone button, it renders the scene, and there we have our variations. Pretty easy, huh? It's all nice when it's all seamlessly integrated into one single environment. All right, with that, let's go ahead and move on, look at some other projects here. What we'll do is we'll take the model that we have here, and we know how to render it for an exterior daylight scene, right? We're going to do the exact same thing we did with the previous model. You just add a sun, you turn on ambient occlusion and final gather. You can see a little bit of ambient occlusion that is subtracting and making it darker in the corners here. The final gather is bouncing light one time to globally illuminate the scene, and we're done. We're doing the same thing. How would we render a scene that looks like this? Well, very easy. We take our existing scene, there's just a couple changes that we need to make, and we can achieve a nighttime scene. One thing that would change is the actual background image. Of course, the background is just a photographic image, so we would have to somehow change the background photograph. You know, there is no magic wand for the background. Now, there is a sky procedural, which is pretty cool. If you use the procedural sky pattern, you can actually turn the sun off. You can change the color of the clouds, give them darker colors, more red and oranges. And so using the procedural sky, you can actually do that. But if you have an image map of the actual background, then you'd have to use the appropriate image map. The second thing we need to do is make objects glow. You can see with these windows here, there's a transparent surface tile assigned to those, and there's a glow parameter. So each of the materials that you have, there's a glow option. You turn the glow up, and it makes objects glow. It's not a light source, but when the scene renders, it looks like that material is glowing. Now, you can assign an actual glow to a light source. I'll talk about that in just a second. But one more thing we did change to is we still had the sun positioned here. And because it's at night, we did not turn the sun off. We actually left the sun on. And what we did is instead of having the sun either a white or a yellowish color, we changed the color to be blue. And this is a nice Hollywood trick. So you can actually render and create night scenes by using blue light. So you can still see the detail of the actual geometry there. Now, with that, as I said, you can make objects glow, but you can also have lights glow. Now, lights, when you turn the glow option for a light source, this is a true volumetric glow effect. So you can see that the beams of light are actually glowing through the actual window frame here. You can see the effect of that splitting light, using the true volumetric glow process for any of the light sources inside of bonzai3d or inside of the RenderZone plugin. Okay, with that, I would like to wrap up this presentation by quickly just looking at a few images that are on our gallery. And this will be used to highlight a few of the other light types that can be used in the RenderZone plugin. So here I think it's pretty easy to see how you could light a scene like this. Now I don't know exactly how these scenes were done. I was just perusing our gallery of the images that people sent us, and based by looking at these, I can sort of take a pretty good guess at the type of lights that could have been used. Now here, this would be pretty much the same as an exterior scene, because we have our sunlight coming in, the final gather will bounce light, ambient occlusion will subtract it from the corners, and we'll be all set. But if we're indoors, here's a couple of new light sources that we can choose. Perhaps a cone light. Cone light is like a spotlight or a flashlight that shines down. We can use that for the recessed lighting here. There's also point lights. Point lights is sort of like a light bulb, a round light bulb that radiates light in all different directions from its single source. So we could put a point light right inside of there. We don't have a candle light option, but you can assign accurate properties to your light sources in candelas and things like that. All right, what other type of lights can we choose? How about a line light? A line light is exactly what it's called, a line light. Take any line, either a vector line or a spline curve, and you can convert that into a light source. So if I could draw a line here and make that a line light. I can draw a line up in that area and convert that into a line light. You can also create a custom light, so you can download any standard lighting data file. We support all of the industry standard data formats, and so you can go to the lighting manufacturer. They have all of their products and all their fixtures. They have the lab data for that is recorded, so you can actually, all you have to do is load that lighting data file, and then that light source will then radiate light based on that lab data. So that would be an extremely accurate way of doing that. You can also use HDRI lights. So what that is actually it's called an environment light. It uses a HDRI image. It stands for high dynamic range image. It's a pixel image that has not only the color data but also the light intensity values of that image when it was recorded. So now you can see that this image will automatically be mapped around your scene in either spherical, cubic, or in a panoramic way, and it'll project light into the scene from that image. So it actually has the light information recorded in that image. It's pretty cool. And if you search the internet, there's a bunch of free HDRI images that can be used. And there's also a projector light. I think you can pretty much guess how that works. It's like a gobo or a gel light. You can load any standard pixel image. It's sort of like a filter in front of that light source. We do have the glow option on for that, so now you can see that you can use any image as a projector light. And the last light source that we'll talk about is an area light. So you can convert any object into a light source. Now here we could have used some 2D flat surfaces, convert that into an area light, and light will radiate off that surface. Now it doesn't have to be a 2D flat surface. You can use any object, any type of complex 3D solid or surface object, and light will radiate off that surface. Now bonzai3d does have NURBS modeling tools, so you can very easily create something like this and then convert it into an actual light source, and light will radiate off that surface. Okay? All right, with that, I would like to thank you for your time. This is just a few of the many features that are in bonzai3d and in the RenderZone plugin. Be sure to check our website for a lot of the other webinars that are coming up. You can log out at any time. This webinar is over. And I'll stick around for another 10-15 minutes. I'll answer any questions that you have. Be sure to type those in, and I'll see those over here, and we'll start to converse back and forth. And with that, I'd like to thank you, and have a nice day.